And welcome to episode number 104 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and it's, I guess, our Christmas episode. Technically, this is our soonest episode to Christmas. We're recording it a week before the big day. This is probably going to be put up on, I don't know, like the Wednesday or something like that, 21st, 22nd. So I guess my question for you is, are you simply having a wonderful Christmas time?
I am not because I'm having a simply wonderful Christmas, Tim. But thank you for
Uh,
asking.
you're welcome.
Yeah. How about you? Are you having a simply wonderful Christmas, Tim?
I am, Tim.
There you go. I love it. I had to reciprocate. But yes, no. Christmas is coming up next week. Uh, we are quickly approaching the draft. We're about a month away from that, and several exciting things happening around the league, even during the off season. And let's start out with the big one for this week. We had our first trade of December.
We did. This was a trade made by you, as most trades seem to be. You sent Zach Eflin, who you had just picked up a couple weeks prior, a week or two prior. You traded him to Yuki for Amed Rosario.
Yeah. This one, as soon as Zach Eflin got traded or signed by the Rays, I immediately picked him up. Zach Eflin's been a guy that I've really been into for a while. As some of you might remember, I traded for him back in the 2021 season for JD Davis in a trade that just didn't really work out for either side. Eflin got hurt. JD Davis wasn't amazing, but I had every intention of potentially using him next season because I really like the fit with Tampa. I think they'll use him right. There's no way he's not going to start, given that they gave him 40 million, which for them is like giving a player 300 million. Uh, and I really think they could help him take the next step. At the same time, he's dealt with injuries to both of his knees. That's not particularly easy to manage. While Tampa is a good landing spot, there's also some downsides in the sense that they don't usually let their pitchers go that deep into games. Could cost some quality starts. And while I think they could maybe help raise his ceiling, I didn't think he necessarily had the highest upside. So it was a guy I thought would be a good back of the rotation starter. That being said, I'm never averse to trading someone like that. And we all know how much Yuki loves his Rays. We discussed a couple of different packages and ultimately settled on Amed Rosario. Amed Rosario is not necessarily somebody I needed, but somebody I, after doing my research, actually think is a pretty solid player. I think when you look at the overall package, you're not necessarily the most wowed, but just of shortstops last season, he was 10th in RBIs. He was tied for 7th in steals with Dansby Swanson and Elvis Andrus. He was 7th in runs. He was 11th in doubles. His home run and OBP numbers were not as good. He's more of a high contact, low walk rate guy. OBP ended up being 14th among shortstops, but like that puts him at the top 10 or right at the top 10 in 4 of the 6 categories that we care about. And he just turned 27 last month. So I definitely think there's a lot of potential with him, to return solid fantasy value and maybe, as he kind of reaches his prime here, maybe even up those numbers a little bit. I mean, if he could just repeat the season he had last year, I'd be pretty happy. I think that would make for a above average bench bat for me. And if not a bench bat for me, I could also just see myself trading him for something else I want. So I'm pretty happy with this return.
Yeah, as you should be. This is I mean, it's not as blatant as your Ha Sung Kim Ha Sung Kim trade, but you still you picked him up 13 days prior. He hadn't been owned since June, and he had a fine season. He was decent, but he wasn't owned for 4 months. And you picked him up and you traded him 13 days later. You said you traded him or you picked him up for the sole purpose of trading him to Yuki. So congrats on that. Um, but it's just I can't believe you keep doing this. I would say Eflin's interesting. Him going to the Rays is interesting. I'd put him a little bit above the Suarez line because of that. But I don't know. He's 4.4% owned. Um, I could see that number jumping up into the 20s or 30s by opening day. But I got Amed Rosario is a very good player. And maybe he's a little better of a real life player than a fantasy player due to the defense being a big part of his value. But like you said, he is a decent ish on base. He scores a lot of runs. Um, I don't know. He hits a decent number of doubles. And sure, I'm not sure I love the profile. I don't expect him to score 86 runs next year if he's going to continue at a 312 on base. That's not something that's sustainable. But either way, he still steals some bases. I think he's certainly you traded a guy you picked up who was on waivers for 4 months for someone who's a very rosterable fantasy player in our league. And I commend you for it. He's got shortstop and outfield eligibility, which is huge.
He'll only be shortstop next year. He only played 16
Gotcha.
outfield, but
Okay. But either way, yeah, you've done it again.
yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want him as my number one shortstop, but as my number three shortstop, and as a young bench bat that I could use, and I think he's definitely useful. He kind of reminds me of Hunter Renfroe, except lop off like some of those home runs and just put it on the steals total, and they're kind of the same player if you think about it, or similar players from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. We all know how much I really want to Renfroe this offseason. So, but I think you're right. The plate discipline is something to worry about and does give me a little bit of pause as to whether or not he'll keep up the runs total. But also, like, he batted second in that Cleveland lineup all of last year. There's no reason that he's not going to bat second in that lineup this year. So, batting in between Steven Kwan and ahead of Jose Ramirez and now Josh Bell. With Josh Naylor, some of these other young guys that they have with another year in the majors, I think could be really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if he hits that runs total again. Even with
Yeah, I could. I don't know. I'd be surprised, I'd say.
yeah, well, that's the beauty of it, right? We play the games and figure out the actual answer to that question. So I guess we can revisit that at the end of next season. I also wonder if he gets traded, honestly. I think he's got a year left on his contract. Cleveland's got a number of middle infield options, including the guy he got traded with, Andres Jimenez. And I wonder if what if the Dodgers trade for him to fill that shortstop hole they got? What if the Braves trade for him? That would be really interesting. Just some food for thought there, but I think that's it for kind of the news in the league right now. I'm sure more stuff is going to pop up as we go into vacation here for a lot of us. Most, if not any of us anymore, are students, so we're not getting that traditional kind of winter break where I feel like we see a lot of moves. It's I feel like transition now a bit more into like a work schedule. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little more moves over the next couple of weeks, the holidays coming up, and I certainly hope so. But and I'm sure there's a lot under the surface that we don't know about. But anything else you'd like to add before we get into our main segment?
No, let's get into the segment.
Yeah, this is a fun one. This was your idea, and you put together all of the work for it. So I'm gonna let you explain this and lead the way here.
Yeah, so essentially we were when we were doing the research for the top 100 trades for episode 100, I kind of found myself thinking about um notable firsts, like when the first time a certain type of trade happened was, like the first draft pick trades, the first everything else. And then so I kind of compiled some of those firsts, and we got a whole new episode out of it, talking about when kind of new steps we've taken, new frontiers. Our original trades were kind of quaint compared to some of our trades now, and it's kind of fun looking back at when things happen for the first time, who was involved in the trades, and I hope it turns out to be a fun segment.
No, absolutely. I am certainly looking forward to the segment. If we want to dive in right here, I wouldn't call that first trade quaint by any stretch of the imagination. It is our very first trade in league history. EVO, or I'll say the trade as it was written in the sheet. Zane and Max send prospects Juan Soto and Brendan Rodgers to Connor in exchange for Trey Turner. Uh, we have talked about this trade a lot over the course of league history, and especially in this podcast. I wonder how many episodes we have mentioned that trade explicitly, but we also ranked that trade pretty high on our top 100. While I'm doing that, is there anything you would like to say about this trade?
Yeah, I agree. It is kind of funny. Looking back first at the way the trade was formatted. It was Zane and Max and prospects Juan Soto and Brendan Rodgers to Connor exchange for Trey Turner. We see in trade number 2 a week later, we see the familiar format of team name has agreed to trade, and then position for team listing the position for everyone. That was there in trade 2, but it kind of goes away for a bit. It's back in trade. Really, it's there in all of your trades, but not
I
in.
I started that with my trade, and then I think it kind of got adopted by a bunch of other people.
Yeah,
Or
it
I
sounds
wonder,
like, yeah, we agreed to adopt your format, your style guide here.
yeah, this I feel like for the most part we still use it.
We
Most
do
of,
completely. I can't remember the last time we did not, and if someone doesn't use it, it's kind of jarring.
yeah, it's jarring, but you always know that it's like teams who don't make trades super often who use that format. Because I feel like you and me and EVO, like the big teams use that format.
Yeah, it's kind of, or if it's a rush job trade, like if you're trying to get it out before a deadline. I know that's, um, we've seen that before.
Yes. Yeah.
God, at least each of the last, excluding 3-team trades, um, it's, yeah, they're all this. We have, here's a fun fact: the words "has agreed to" appear 428 times in that trade history spreadsheet, and we've made 510 trades.
Well, so also have agreed to is 55 times. So
Okay, so
whatever
55
plus 55, that's 482
483.
or 443. Yeah, thanks. So I mean there's a couple like there's a trade here that's like oh, where was it? I just had it up. There's one where it's just is trading. Um there's a couple where it's just is trading. It is trading appears 6 times. Mostly with teams or trades involving Ruthvik, interestingly enough. Uh, 4 of them are ones with Ruthvik involved. There is also agreed to send. Agreed to send shows up 89 times. Uh,
Agreed to send.
yeah, agreed to
Interesting. That I think that's commonly used in conditional trades.
there's a whole bunch of trades. So for a lot of them are EVO. So for example, EVO last December made 6 trades in 3 days, and all of them say EBO has agreed to send. Andrew has agreed to send. It's mostly Andrew and EBO. Here's one with Yuki, but it's one with Ruthvik. But it's all BBOs that I'm seeing here has agreed to send. There's an
Yeah,
Anthony that agreed to send, a couple Anthonys that are agreed to send. Wow. Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the most recent trade that doesn't say agreed to in there, and there 484 trades have say agreed to. Deadline: the Off-White Sox trade Eric's 2023 second to the Crone Zone for John Birdie. That's the only trade since the end of June. June 29th, the executive batting order will send shortstop, second base outfielder Tommy Edman. And then, yeah, here's a trade. And yeah, you see it broken when it's the Bellies. The Flexin Bellies trades its 2026 second. So yeah, you're definitely right about it being teams that aren't. You, Eric, and me kind of follow the format every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zane kind of goes a little bit off, but not all the way. And then after that, it's a little bit fair game, but yeah, agreed to trade or agreed to send.
I love it. These are the things that I love the podcast for. We find just some of this crazy stuff. It is always something that's in the back of my mind when I see trades announced, and when it is not in the format that like you and I use, it annoys the hell out of me. It is so funny to see. God, I really hope there's like another crazy one in here that we're just missing.
Like a crazy format?
Yeah, crazy format. There's one, I don't know if we said this, EBO has acquired. Oh, here's my favorite one so far. Trade 50, Abor Pujols acquires Fernando Tatis, Sixto Sanchez, comma, Yohan Moncada acquires Jesus Sanchez, Danny Jansen, Brian Hayes, Johan Camargo, my 2019 first and your 2019 third. So not has agreed to or like acquired, and then it's like to this person. It's just list who both sides acquires. And not only that, Eric always spells acquires without a C.
Yeah.
None of these have a C in acquires. It's just AQUIRES.
Yeah, Eric must have been the one who announced that trade.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but Eric will often just use acquires without a C. I've noticed that a few times.
I have not noticed.
We have definitely discussed this before.
I don't think we have.
Okay, well, I thought we have, but
yeah, and there's one I remember. Trade 164. Daniel and Alex's team has traded outfielder Jesus Sanchez, blah blah blah, to Andrew's team for shortstop Tim Anderson and starting pitcher Sandy Alcantara. That's a big one because I remember Daniel and Alex saying, "Hey, I don't know your team names. I'm just going to say Daniel and Alex's team and Andrew's team."
Oh, I love that. Here's another one. Do you remember when Connor's team was named Yohan Moncada, and some teams were like, you have to like change this because we keep getting confused with the player? I remember Max being one of those guys. So trade number 4, EBO has agreed to terms with Connor Stemme to send Austin Meadows, Jesus Sanchez, and Sean Murphy, blah, 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 to Yohan Moncada for Jake Arrieta and Lorenzo Cain. So they still mentioned a team name, but make it explicitly clear at the beginning that they are agreeing to terms with Connor, as well as
that is fun.
That's fun. That one takes the cake for me so far.
Yeah, that's the only one. That's the only trade in the list which has agreed to terms in the trade.
Oh my god, that's nasty. I think it's definitely the only time too somebody's full name is written out in a trade that is not like a player, like one of the owners.
I think you're definitely right. I can't imagine yeah, another one. I guess no one's full name. Michael Resnick's last name is in a lot of trades.
Yes, it is. Oh my god. Team Resnick. What a legendary team name. Wow, we have spent an awesome amount of time talking about this, and I hope you keep all of this in, because this is why this is why I do this podcast. But Uh,
No, absolutely. I agree. It's fun doing a deep dive on
it
this
is
all.
so great doing a deep dive. But yeah, anything else we'd like to add on this point?
No, let's move on. The next trade number 4, EBO, that agreed to terms trade. EBO has agreed to terms with Connor to send Austin Meadows, Jesus Sanchez, and Sean Murphy to Yohan Moncada for Jake Garrett and Lorenzo Kane. This was the first Sean Murphy trade. Sean Murphy has been traded 12 times. He has been traded more times than anyone else has. He's been on 9 different teams. And this was the first time he was moved. He was moved all the way back in trade number 4.
Oh my God. Yeah, this is a pretty lopsided trade in hindsight. But what an awesome trade this was. I can't believe Sean Murphy has been traded 12 times now. I know I was a part of several of those trades, or at least two of those trades, but oh boy, I mean he just gets kicked around. And it's funny now because he's an all-star catcher. Who's like actually a pretty solid player, but he still keeps getting battered around this league. One of my favorite things is he actually got traded in real life now in a 3-team trade. And this offseason or last offseason, we traded him in a 3-team trade. And
We're just like the real GMs, I swear.
we are. And he was replacing a Contreras in Atlanta. And the reason I traded him away in that 3-team trade last offseason was because a Contreras replaced him on my team. So I love the symmetry here, but I love that this is one of the ones we brought up because my God, Sean Murphy, just what a legend.
Yeah, I wonder if part of that is because he's kind of established this image as a guy who gets traded a lot. So people kind of see him as being more closer to replacement level than he really is.
I think before he hit the majors, I think it's like, hey, he's an interesting prospect, like from a rankings perspective, but he's also a catcher prospect, and you know how hard it can be for some of those guys to really, hit and make an impact early on. And once he's hit the majors, it feels like he just keeps getting traded from teams who find a better option. I traded him or I got him from Alex, to because they got Gary Sanchez for me. I actually think, let's see if we can pull some of these other ones up. That was not when I acquired Wilson Contreras to replace him. That was not the first time that Wilson Contreras replaced him. As a matter of fact, Alex traded Wilson Contreras to EBO and got Sean Murphy in return. And then they thought Gary Sanchez was better, so then they took Gary Sanchez. I got Sean Murphy, and then I completed the triangle by acquiring Wilson Contreras from EBO, shipped Sean Murphy off to you. You had him for a couple of months there while you're waiting for Adley to come up. Once Adley came up and Jonah Heim was hitting, well, you shipped him off to Anthony. Like he just since he's reached the majors, he's just been getting replaced just because people have had better options. And even Anthony's rostering 3 catchers, right? He's rostering Grandal and Joey Bart as well. Like, how long is Sean Murphy on his team? Do you think Sean Murphy's his long-term catcher, or
I don't know. If Andy Rodriguez comes up and starts mashing, then no, Sean Murphy's not his long-term catcher.
Eddie Rodriguez is just listed as Fantrax as a top prospect catcher. So, and he is a Pirate. So watch out, Sean Murphy. You might be on the move. Two other Sean Murphy things I'd like to say. One, Sean Murphy's second ever trade is a particularly fun one because he was traded for Tom Murphy in a Murphy catcher swap. This was between Eric and Connor. And maybe my favorite Sean Murphy fact, besides the number of times he has been traded, Yuki of all teams has never owned Sean Murphy.
That is funny.
Yeah, that one cracks me up every time. I believe 2 other teams have not owned him as well. I believe Daniel and Matt are one of them, and I'm forgetting who the other one is. But this fact just recently came up in the chat.
Yeah, it was Jake is the other team who was
Yeah,
not
yeah,
owned.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, okay, so Daniel and Matt have Alejandro Kirk, thanks to me. Uh, I don't think they're going to get Sean Murphy anytime soon. Yuki is Tyler Stevenson and Dalton Varsho. Well, I do think Varsho loses catcher eligibility at some point. I don't know if Yuki's running down the door to get Sean Murphy, and Jake has JT Realmuto, so probably not getting Sean Murphy in the short term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're probably right, but I could definitely see him being on the move again.
Absolutely. Uh,
All right. But yeah, let's move on here, so that we're not spending too long on uh
yeah,
every trade.
we'll go shorter. You know me, I have a story to tell about everything.
All
Um,
right, the next trade number 7. This was where I traded you Blake Parker, or I traded you Jordan Alvarez for Blake Parker. This was the first trade between the two of us. It was also, interestingly enough, the first trade that did not involve Connor. Connor was involved in the first 6 trades in league history. I did not know that before this afternoon.
yeah, I did not know that either. I think that surprises me more than the fact that this was the first trade between. Actually, I don't know if I should be surprised this is the first trade between the two of us or not. I knew it was one of the first trades, but yeah, I mean, Connor was a heavy hitter in the trade market early on, and I mean, he still is. You know, he's made the fourth most trades in league history, although you were quickly catching up to him. I know he's had a bit of a quiet off season with being busy with work, but yeah, like he made some big trades early on, and not just like a big in terms of quantity of trades, but like the players involved in those trades were big. So yeah, but this is a fun one. I always enjoy rubbing this trade in your face, Blake Parker for Jordan Alvarez. I'll tell this one story and then we can move on. My favorite story about this was before we uh, got the trade history in the spreadsheet. We're waiting for an opportunity, to get like Slack premium so we could get the unlimited messages. You and I were debating, was the trade just Blake Parker for Jordan Alvarez, or was there anything else involved? I thought it was just Parker for Alvarez. You thought there was more involved. And as soon as we got Slack premium, the very first thing I did was search up this trade, and it was just Parker for Alvarez. So um, that's my fun Parker for Alvarez story. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, that was a bummer. Trade number 11 was another trade that involved us and also early trader Connor. Of course, Connor made a lot of trades early because we dealt him a really terrible team. It's amazing what he was able to do with it. But this was a 3-team trade, the first 3-team deal. We have had a few 3-team deals since then. Um, I believe we've had 5 in total. Um, I'm not completely sure, but this was definitely the one big one, the one that had like a lot of interesting pieces moving in every direction.
Yeah, this one was special. I mean, because it was just players, there was no picks involved. We'll get the pick trading later. It was I think I mentioned this on episode 100, but it's special to me because I don't think we're ever going to see the conditions come together to get a trade like that ever again. I think more often than not now we're going to see 2-team trades and maybe players are flipped afterwards. You know, that's something I commonly do, or just stuff involving a lot more picks or fewer players. You know, I just like you're never going to see something like this again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. The only other 3-team deals we had, of course, the famous Heriberto 3-team deal. We also had, there was a Tristan. Oh no, that was the Heriberto one. There was Ryan Weathers, a second and a first. The Ryan Weathers 3-team deal, that was a whole nothing. There was the catcher 3-team deal, which I think is probably the second best one. And I have a real soft spot for it because it's just so dang fun. Um, and then the fifth 3-team deal was the one this year where I tried to outbid you for Tyler Anderson, and then I kind of threw in the towel so I could get a third rounder, which turned out to be a 2100 third rounder.
Definitely nothing in the same caliber as that 3-team trade early on. Maybe the Heriberto one was close, but it was mostly just picks. I wouldn't even call it close. There was also another 3-team trade that resembled this 3-team trade between me, EBO, and Yuki way back when, which would have seen me get I forget who. I think I would have given I don't even remember now. Greinke was involved in that deal. And then he had a couple of injury issues during the playoffs. So there's some feet dragging. And then Jake swooped in at the last second. And that's how I got George Springer and Max Muncy, gave him JD Martinez, Zach Greinke, a couple prospects. So that one worked out better for me in hindsight. But we almost had another great 3-team trade. Yeah. Anything else, or would we like to jump on this next trade?
Let's jump on the next one. The next notable first trade number 14. Eric sent Jack Flaherty, Andrew Miller, and Kelvin Herrera to you for Eddie Rosario, Joaquim Soria, and the very first ever player to be named later. I'm going to understand that this player to be named later has not yet been enacted.
Yes, it has not. The player to be named later was supposed to be a player that I drop. Eric would have the opportunity to look at the player that I drop and just immediately take that player on. And to this date, he has not done that. Now, maybe one day he will. I know he wanted Colton Wong before I cut him like a little bit. And then I did cut him. That could have been a prime opportunity for him to use it. But I don't even know if Eric remembers it, even though I've mentioned it a couple times in this podcast that he does have this player to be named later to use. So Eric, if you're listening to this, maybe one of these days we'll be able to work out a player to be named later. Just someone I cut. If you're interested in them, they're yours. So there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I love these player to be named later deals. I'm trying to see.
Laters have there been though? There's the big one. I don't know if you included this trade.
Tyler Zuber.
No, well, Zuber, but I was thinking about Kyle Lewis.
Kyle Lewis traded for himself is not included in this list.
That should be the first time a player was traded for himself. I guess we're going to take a little detour here. Yes.
I guess so. We can do that. The first and only time a player was traded for himself.
Yes. And that is no longer possible thanks to the loophole that we closed.
Yeah. It looks like additionally the first player to be named later, which was fulfilled. Yes. You traded Adonis Medina and a player to be named later to Ruthvik for Alex Reyes. That player to be named later was eventually Blake Rutherford.
Yeah. I think if I remember correctly, Ruthvik was didn't have roster space at that time. And I was like, hey, for like 2 weeks, I'll hold on to this player. And then by this time you have to make a cut. And I think something similar happened with Kyle Lewis, if I remember correctly. I held on to him because you didn't have the roster space at that time.
Yeah, exactly. I needed the room.
Yeah, it ended up being Kyle Lewis once he did have the roster space. Yeah. Or other way around. I think you had Kyle Lewis initially. I took him on and then we traded him back to you because you got 2 players in the Glaber deal. Rizzo and Hendricks. I just got Glaber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Do we want to move on, or do you have any other thoughts about players to be named later?
No, I don't have any other thoughts. Let's move on to this next one.
All right. The next one, trade 17. Eric sends Michael Brantley to you for Steven Gonzalez. I had this as the first time you traded a nothing prospect for a good major leaguer. The first real ripoff you made. I remember there being somewhat of a bidding war for Steven Gonzalez at some point. I don't know why. He hasn't pitched in the majors.
Was there a war for him? Wow.
I guess he has pitched in the majors briefly in 2018 and 2021 later. Hasn't been any good. But yeah, I remember there being some sort of, and I wish we still had the Slack premium archive so we could see, but there was something with Steven Gonzalez.
Yeah, I think And it's funny that you say the first ripoff I made because we just talked about Blake Parker for Jordan Alvarez. But I picked up Steven Gonzalez like not too long before that. And Eric was trying to dump Brantley, and I was kind of surprised by that. I think Brantley had been coming off a couple injury plagued seasons and then would have like a hot start to 2018, if I remember correctly. And I don't know why Eric was trying to trade him. He traded him. It worked out in the end. So, I know I just traded Brantley away. But Brantley's had two like huge stints on my team. And I think he's in the top 10 for longest stints on my roster. He is number 9. 1,281 days on my roster between two different stints. So
Yeah, I think it's less that it was the first rip. It's not the first rip-off trade you've made, but it was the first rip-off trade of this variety that you'd ever made.
yeah, where I like pick up a prospect and like flip them like a week later.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, fair. I like that one. That was one of my favorite trades with Eric. Eric and I
Of
used to
course
do a
it
lot more
was.
trading. We don't trade as much anymore. But back in the day, we were bigger trade partners first 2 seasons. Um,
Yeah,
Now
you
it's just a couple
were.
of trades. Yeah.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next trade. Uh, you sent Blake Parker to EBO for Ken Giles and Adonis Medina. This was the first trade between the two most popular trade partners in league history, you and EBO.
Yeah, EVO and I really kept the trades up, and if anything, I think like they passed Eric for most trades with me, or Connor. Both of those teams end up like skyrocketing. Like I made 35 trades with EBO. Um, that's insane. 35 out of the 510 that we have made. To put that in context, Daniel and Matt in league history have only made 38 trades. So that is 3 less trades I have made with EBO than Daniel and Matt have made overall. This one was a relatively tame trade. I do remember, let's see if I can pull it back up. I can remember the context. Um, I feel like I got the better end of this at the time. I'd love to understand the context of this, but it is funny that I had Blake Parker for a second time that season and traded him away for like a notable name or two notable names because Adonis Medina was like a pretty highly regarded prospect at the time. He's like second in pitching prospects behind Sixto Sanchez in that Phillies farm system at the time. So two Blake Parker trades for me in 20 trades, our first 20 trades. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Medina was definitely an interesting prospect, and the fact that you got him for a reliever that you must have just picked up off the scrap heap
Yep,
after being cut
that's exactly
by me.
what.
Um,
This is great.
uh, you were doing this since day one, I gotta say.
Yeah.
All right, up next. This is a big one. Trade number 22. Eric sends Alex Kirilloff, Kristen Stewart, and Sean Murphy. There's Sean Murphy again to Kyle for Kyle's first round draft pick. It was the very first time someone traded a draft pick.
Yeah, this is a fun one. If I recall correctly, did Eric make this trade and then was like, oh hey, BTW, like you can trade first round picks or draft picks as a whole?
I think so. Yeah, I think this
I
was
think that's
kind of
exactly.
we no one knew we could do this.
Yeah, and then there's this big rush to get the pick, the number 1 overall pick, for Casey Mize, and this was part of it. Yeah, this was a really notable trade at the time. It's funny because you look at it now and it doesn't seem that way, but it really was at the time.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, it started a whole big thing. I remember that that whole that rush to try and get the first pick to try and get Casey Mize. And good teams were involved. It was Eric and EBO who were trying to do it. They weren't tanking teams. They were the two top seeds in the league who were getting involved in this.
Oh yeah. These are big. Yeah, absolutely. Big hitters at that time.
Yeah. And I remember it took us kind of a while before we were able to kind of narrow down what a first rounder was worth. Because like I traded Bo Burrows for a first rounder, but like then also there was like um uh Kirilloff was a top prospect at that point, and Kristen Stewart and Sean Murphy were all three very interesting names in 2018 for just one first rounder.
Oh yeah. I think it took us a while to value the picks. I still think that the valuation of those picks sometimes fluctuates a little bit. I think for the most part, we've kind of standardized it. I think the latest issue we have here is trying to figure out how to value picks that are farther away. I don't think we have mastered that yet. And I think there are some wildly different valuations, which has led to some trades, but I think there's been a lot of disagreement over that.
I agree. And I also think it's fair to say that me trading Bo Burrows for a first, that was a late first back when we had not yet thought to trade away second and third rounders.
Oh yeah. When was the first non-first round pick traded? Did you include?
We'll talk about that later this episode.
Okay, great. But yeah. Anything else you want to say, or do you want to move on to the next one?
No, let's move on. The next one is one of the ones we were kind of following from at Trade 24. Eric sends his first rounder and Eric's first rounder to Connor for Connor's first rounder. And this was the first trade that was only picks that had no players. We've had a lot of trades with only picks, especially draft day of this past year was a lot of that. But this was the first time there was a trade with no players in it, only picks.
Yeah, I'm assuming this was part of kind of that similar uh push that we just mentioned to get Casey Mize. But certainly an interesting one here.
It was, and the picks ended up being Jared Kelenic and Casey Mize for Nick Madrigal, because Casey Mize ended up being the second pick. And that so at that way it looks pretty bad for Eric. But obviously, if if anyone besides Connor was picking first, they would have taken Mize.
Yeah.
And who knows who would have been the second? Maybe it would have been Madrigal. Maybe it would have been Gorman. I know he was highly regarded. Um,
Yeah, Madrigal was always one of those better in real life than fantasy players. Like Madrigal had like the like what Luis Arias is right now is what I think people expected Nick Madrigal to be, and it just hasn't panned out.
yeah, I agree. It's still interesting though to see. We would never see giving up another first rounder to move up one spot in the draft. That's unheard of, especially since knowing that Connor was never going to be taking Mize to begin with. This kind of feels like a blunder from Eric.
Yeah, definitely a blunder from Eric indeed. But hey, everybody really wanted Casey Mize, so I think it's funny because none of the players have really panned out. I guess like Kelenic had like a hot month that was usable, and like Mize has had a couple of decent stretches with injuries, but like none of these players have really panned out the way we thought they could. So
Yeah, we got a lot of figuring out to do at the very least with those guys. It's going to be interesting that 2018 draft looking back.
oh yeah.
Moving on now, yeah, trade number 30. And this was the first second rounder to be dealt. And it was EBO sending that second rounder along with their first and a bunch of other things. To me, I was the first person to acquire a second rounder. And I was trading at some point. Connor's first round pick ended up in my hands. And then this was me sending it to EBO. And I got Brendan Rodgers, Marco Gonzalez, Blake Parker, Nathan Eovaldi, Danny Jansen, and the EBO's first and second.
My God. So that's 3 of the first 30 trades Blake Parker was involved. Actually, 4, because he was also involved in the 3-team trade, which we neglected to mention, in which you traded him back to me like 2 weeks after I traded him to you. Uh, oh my goodness. So he was traded 15 days. So May 23rd, then 15 days after, then a month after, then 15 days after was this trade. And I'm going to spoil it for you. He was never traded again after those first 30 trades. He was traded
Man,
for the first 30 trades, and then that was that. Blake Parker just fell off the face of the earth. I wonder what Blake Parker is up to right now in real
good
life.
question. Like
uh,
right this moment.
yeah, right this moment. What do you think he does for a living, though?
Um, I don't know. He's currently a free agent. It says he hasn't pitched at any level. Actually, he pitched for the Cardinals AAA team this past year.
Oh, huh. There's an article here from July 31st, 2022 on ArkansasOnline.com that says Parker content at home with MLB career on hold. He was pitching for AAA with the Cardinals and then opted out. He was currently living in Fayetteville with his wife and 4 children. So good
All
for
right, there we go.
good for Blake Parker. I'm happy for him. But yeah, not much else I wanted to say about this trade. Always fun to see a pick traded. It's funny. I feel like we talked about Blake Parker more than the pick, but anything else you'd really like to add?
No, just kind of trading second rounders now. We kind of broken into trying to value those. We weren't really sure at the time what the value of a second rounder was either.
No, and valuing second rounders is tricky, especially because I think the value of second rounders at the top of the round is vastly different from the value of second rounders at the bottom of the round. And like I get like top, bottom of the round for every round is kind of different, but like we don't really see too many trades. Actually, I don't think we see as many trades of second round picks at the top of the round. Just like we don't see too many trades of first round picks at the top of the round, just because I think that their teams are a little more reluctant to trade them. But yeah, I still don't know how to value them, and I have a deficit of them right now, actually. So I still owe one to you and one to Ruthvik. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. But let's talk about the next big deal. Trade number 36. Eric sent Freddie Peralta and Kyle Barraclough. When was the last time you've heard that name?
I just thought about Kyle Barraclaw recently, and I don't remember the context, but he came up. And if I search him up on Wikipedia, I will remember why. But go ahead.
All right, but anyway, they were traded to Anthony for Rich Hill, Matt Barnes, and its second rounders in the next two drafts, which makes this the first ever future pick traded. It
Oh,
was going from Anthony to Eric, the first ever pick, more a year in the future.
uh, I love that. I do remember as a side note now why I saw Kyle Barraclaw's name was because I had landed on Steve Cishek's Wikipedia page early this week, and they were once traded for each other. Um, why I landed on Steve Cishek's Wikipedia page, I don't know. But interesting to me that Anthony was the one who was trading the future second round pick. I would not have guessed that he would be the first team to do that. Also interesting that Freddie Peralta was dealt that early. I know it took a little while to become relevant, but definitely interesting to see his name pop up.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's in hindsight, a solid deal for Anthony.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
great deal.
interesting to see him acquire Freddie Peralta again recently.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that kind of came around full circle for him. See how many times Freddie Peralta's been traded. 3 trades in this league now, it looks like. Looks like he was cut by Anthony at one point because then the
Man,
trade after that was Alex trading him to Jake. Alex must have picked him up. That's a good ad for him.
yeah, there you go.
What's
But
next?
yeah, I up next we have trade 45. You
Ooh, we
sent
don't need
Jordan Alvarez, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and a conditional pick. Uh, to North Korea for Zach Greinke, Chris Archer, Chris Shaw, Jorge Mateo. This was the first ever conditional trade. We've had a lot of them since then. This is the first trade to involve a condition. That condition specifically was that they would get a 2019 second rounder if you won the championship and a third rounder if you did not win the championship. It's a kind of a very, very simple early type of condition where there was a pick going either way. First ever time a conditional pick was traded, you sent another conditional pick 2 trades later, 1 day later, where Connor would just get whichever pick you don't send North Korea. I thought that was kind of funny.
Wow, I forgot about that. That's interesting because like nowadays, like someone would want something more concrete than, hey, it's either going to be a second round pick or a third round pick. From Connor's perspective in the second trade, not the first trade, but yeah, this trade ended up being a big bummer for me. Trading away Jordan, I knew it was going to be a bad idea. I thought Greinke and Archer would really complete my rotation. They wouldn't make the trade without Jordan. I'm already talked about this a lot in episode 100. I'm not going to rehash this, but I do remember us debating the second or the third round pick, and that was kind of the compromise solution. So it worked out nicely.
Yeah,
not for me, but you know what? It did work out in the sense that I wouldn't have won the championship without Greinke in year 3, but I'm not going to rehash that debate.
But anyway, that was the first condition. We've seen many since. Moving on, that same conditional trade we mentioned, where you would send the whichever pick you don't send. You also send a 2020 third rounder, as well as Calvin Herrera for Adrian Morejon to Connor. That was the first third rounder traded. We had not seen a third rounder traded until that point.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really surprise me. I'm guessing people didn't really value the third round picks and didn't really think much about trading them. I think kind of similar to, for those of you in the football league, like the 5th round picks rarely get traded. Like people just really don't care about them. I think we've started to realize the value of third round picks. There's certainly been some gems taken in the third round.
Yeah, I think it really depends on how good you are at drafting. Like, I know me and Eric have been fairly good at getting good value in the third round. I know Anthony doesn't make a lot of third rounders, but I think the ones he has made have been good.
Oh yeah.
Low-key, Anthony is a very good drafter.
He is. I mean, Alec Thomas in the 2019 draft. He got Mason Wynn in the 2020 draft, although he just traded him away. Was it the 2020 draft or am I? No, 2021. Sorry. Last year's second round. Andrew Painter. I took Connor Norby. Frank Mazzucato is a third round pick. Can't forget about him. Shane McClanahan was the last pick of the 2019 prospect draft. Still one of my favorites. Facts. Technically, a third round pick did get dealt in that previous trade because that did end up being the conditional pick, but that did vest after trade 47 happened. So I guess however you want to view it, the first third round pick is either dealt in trade 45 or trade 47.
Yeah, I would call it this one just because this was the first
I would too.
Guaranteed one.
Yeah, I would too.
All right.
The next one, I can't guess what it is. I'm curious. I have a guess.
Yeah. You sent Travis Shaw, Jeremy Jeffress, a 2020 second and a 2021 second for Anthony Rizzo. This was the first ever deadline day deal.
Oh, yeah, this one was fun. I just reminded Eric of this one recently. It's on the topic of debating what the price of a second round pick is. I made a clip to Eric about like, hey, there's second round picks, just like whatever. And Eric was like, okay, hey, well, give me Shaw, Jeffress, and 10 second round picks for Anthony Rizzo. I was like, all right, like, hold on, cowboy. So we settled on 2. This ended up being one of my better deals. Jeremy Jeffress is having a really good season. and Eric wanted him out of the bullpen. And I thought the hitter upgrade from Shaw to Rizzo was definitely worth it, and I was able to replace Shaw at third base with Mike Moustakas at the time. So yeah, this one worked out nicely for me. You know, I parlayed Rizzo into um, Glaber, and all this other stuff. So, as an aside, if we did like a trade tree for this one, this is one of the interesting like trade tree ones to look at. Because this had some big implications.
Yeah, no, absolutely. With that Rizzo deal you made with me.
Yeah, and then that turned into the 9-player return I got from Eric for Glaber, Woodruff, you know, turned into Meadows, and you know, I got Woodruff back, and VR got that. Like all these players, that's a trade tree that's still going on today.
Yeah, I think a lot of trade trees are still going.
Oh, a lot of them are, yeah. Some are not. A lot of them are. This one is.
All right. But yeah, that was the first deal done on a deadline day. I remember in 2018, a lot of deals were made in the 3 or 4 days before. But it turns out deadline day itself was fairly quiet. That was, I believe, August 8th, I want to say. Yeah, August 10th. So the deadline has kind of shifted back over time. But yeah, August 10th, that was the first of only 2 trades made that day. The second one was a much bigger one, of course. The me trading for Tatis.
Oh, yeah, that is much bigger.
Yeah. Not one of the deals that we're talking about in this segment, but it was one of the big ones from episode 100. Moving on now, though, to episode 52, or to
Trade
trade
52.
52.
We are if you multiply episode 52 by 2, we are this is that episode. So
Wow, we are on episode 52 times 2. What happened in episode 52? Do you have any guesses?
okay, so 52 would have been almost exactly a year ago. Probably a little further back than a year ago, just since we haven't exactly done one a week. My guess is interview, like early off-season previews, some early trades would be my guess.
This
Maybe
episode,
awards.
you're right about awards.
Oh,
Episode 52, 2021 awards. EBO's back and Cam has an announcement. That's the name of it. That was, I guess, the episode we unveiled the 2021 awards. Zane announced that he was not leaving the league, and I announced that I was changing my name.
that is right. To the Liam Hendricks experience. Are you still the Liam Hendricks experience? I know you want to board pool holster a little bit. It looks like you are back to the Liam Hendricks experience.
I am, yeah.
Good for you.
But yeah, trade 52. This is Anthony traded Jeff McNeil and Michelle Baez to panic at the Frisco for Sean Murphy. This was the first trade by a non-original league member. Ruthvik joined the league and made this trade.
How about that? I love that his first reaction was, I got to continue to Sean Murphy trade train. But you know, in hindsight, actually, I think Ruthvik mentioned this earlier this week. Like that trade, actually, like Murphy and McNeil, probably a relatively even deal. I know both of those players kind of left those rosters not too long afterwards, but some two players that are still contributing today, McNeil and Murphy, and obviously Baez not so much, but yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The first of many trades by Ruthvik. In his first move in the league, he acquires a Met.
That he does.
All right. Trade 54 is the next one we wanted to mention. Team Cohen sends Blake Snell and Edwin Diaz to Life of Auto for Corey Seager, Austin Riley, and Davey Bukowskis. That was the first ever trade done at a meetings. First of many meetings that we've had, and this was the first one done at one of those. The Winter Meetings 2018, where I wore a suit.
Yes, that is my favorite part. You wore a suit and gave a presentation on all of your prospects. My goodness. And I remember giving you a lot of flack because you wore them with sneakers, and I made fun of you for that. Uh, but yeah, this was a big one, and all of these names now, other than JB Bukowskis, are like mega parts of this league. Um,
Wait a
and
minute. JB Bukowskis is a mega part of this league.
is he part
He's
of
been
those Tyler Super deals?
Yeah, Tyler Zuber and JB Bukowskis. They're traded all the time.
I always say
I
Tyler
would
Super.
say I would say JB Bukowskis is a bigger part of the league than Edwin Diaz is.
Oh my goodness. All right, sure. You know what? Sure. I will grant you that. No, I can't grant you that. No. Um, ugh, this is frustrating. But yeah, I mean, Blake Snell, Edwin Diaz, Corey Seager, Austin Riley, all contributing last season. Snell and Seager did it for a championship winning team, Jake's team. Austin Riley's been a huge part of Yuki's team. Edwin Diaz was traded from Jake's team before the season to Ruth Vic. But all of the major contributors to teams that have made the playoffs at one point or another. So good for them.
Yeah.
Definitely deadline or not deadline winter meetings, and it's been nice to have more of them. They have shifted over the years to Zoom, um, but it's been awesome to be able to do them still.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be fun to have in-person ones sometimes. Like an in-person one prior to the draft. We had like a weekend away or something once a year
That would
as a
be.
league. That'd be fun.
I'm hoping that happens at some point.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
ready
Um
for every single trade ever.
I would love that. But moving on, the next trade, the next first in league history, trade 61. EBO sends Jose Peraza for the pick that became Kyler Murray. This was the first ever trade at a draft.
Oh my god, this one was a great one. Peraza was actually coming off a half decent season, and Eiler never played for the A's, but then Peraza sucked. So it ended up being a bunch of nothing, but he had a 326 OBP with 14 home runs and 23 steals in 2018 for the Reds camp. What happened to Jose Peraza?
Not much. He was um I don't know. Derek Dietrich kind of took over for him after a slow start in 2019, and then he bounced around a little and never really ended up living up to his potential.
Yeah, it just never quite worked out. Never one of those guys with like low walk rates and doesn't really make a lot of hard contact. Yeah, just didn't quite work out. It's a shame. He's Mets just re-signed him to a minor league deal 2 days ago, so he'll be big league spring training. He last played in the majors with the Mets in 2021. He got in 64 games and was with Boston the year before that, and then Cincinnati before that. I knew he was a Dodger prospect, but I did not realize he got into 7 games with the Dodgers in 2015. But Kyler's also been in the news too, as he just recently tore his ACL, and he and his head coach don't seem to get along. But maybe he should have picked baseball. But Arizona is certainly better than playing in the Oakland Coliseum, so I won't hold it against him. But yeah, anything else you want to say about this trade?
Nope, that's about it. Moving on, there wasn't a first for a little while. Trade 105. Me and Eric swapped 2022 first rounders. That was the first pick 3 or more years in the future.
Oh wow, yeah, because that was 2019 when that trade happened.
Yep, 2019. We were basically betting on which one of us would be better. That was a big formative moment in our rivalry, I'd say. Betting on which one of us would be better 3 years in the future. Who would be better in 2021? I thought that I would be better at that point. He thought that he would be better at that point. And In the end, I was better in the regular season, but he won the title. So he ended up, his pick ended up being the worst pick, and I got the worst end of the deal.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time where you thought that, hey, like whatever he was doing wasn't sustainable, or like, hey, like some of these early winners are going to fall off. And some of these early winners have fallen off, right? Like EBO has fallen off, but some of these early winners have been a bit more sustainable in the way that they've built their rosters and a bit more aggressive. And I think Eric and I have been able to do that, and you've kind of taken EBO's place. So not a bad gamble. I mean, like, you did have the better regular season record, but now it goes to the playoffs, it's a 1 week matchup and that determines everything. So just how it goes.
Yeah, no, that is just how it goes sometimes. Overall, I think uh, I'm glad I made the trade in general. It was a fun one to make, and it kind of put some stakes into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that really jump started that rivalry.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on now, the next first trade 172, the famous Felix Hernandez deal between you and EBO. That was an insane deal with a lot of notes, and that was the very first quarantine deal.
Yeah, I remember this. I was really bored over quarantine and I was like, fuck it, like let's make a trade. I just picked up Felix because he had signed a minor league deal with the Orioles. And if I remember correctly, we voided that trade. Like one of the conditions was like he had to play during the season. And I think he opted out. Or something, didn't make the roster, whatever it was. I think it was an opt out. So it didn't quite work out. And none of the things that happened in the trade ever happened, but it was a fun one. I thought there was a small chance that maybe I could get like a third round pick out of it, and I'll take like a 1% chance of getting a third round pick over not having any chance of getting another third round pick. So it was fun.
Yeah. Um, I think it was fun. Up next, trade 218. This was the Ozzy Albies deal with uh, with Connor. EBO sending him to Connor. This was the first time a protected pick. We don't see this a lot, but this is the first time there was some protection in picks. Ozzy Albies, Josh Hader, Ryan Hayes, the better of Eric's and Alex's 2021 first with top 3 protection. I think it was just kind of an interesting deal. We were kind of starting at this point to realize, hey, I don't want a crappy pick. If I'm giving up some things for a first round pick, I don't want to be, or if I'm giving up a first round pick, I don't want it to be a top one. And I don't know, a lot of weird, this kind of set the stage a lot for a lot of the weird negotiating and weaseling around giving up top picks that we see now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really the only way a lot of these top picks get dealt nowadays because, as I alluded to earlier with the second round picks, like, especially in the first round, too, like, there's a big difference between the number 1 overall pick and the number 12 overall pick. And we've seen some surprise finishes for teams, and especially now with the draft lottery, right? Like, we have seen teams who just barely missed the playoffs for one reason or another, and they are getting like a top 3 pick. And
Yeah.
that's something, some risk. Sometimes you just have to accept that risk, and sometimes it ends up working out. Even if that pick ends up being super high, but uh, I'm glad that people have started to take some ownership of that and just be like, hey, like let's actually kind of whittle it down a little bit. So I think it's worked out nicely. I think it's been a good thing for the league.
Yeah, I agree. The next trade is your famous Fernando Tatis deal, trade 276. That was the first hypothetical pick trade. This kind of started a whole thing that you do now, and that we've had a lot of discussion about in the past month.
Yes, I could go on a whole 20-minute rant about how this trade went down. Instead, I would encourage anybody who is still curious about it, who has not listened to the interview that EBO and I did on this trade. What was it? 2 years ago now? Wow, I
Yeah.
mean, it's been over 2 years. That is hard to believe. It has been over 2 years since that trade, but Yeah, I would encourage you to listen to that. But the TLDR version is that EVO put Tatis on the block. I knew I really wanted Tatis. I threw Story as a starting point. And I didn't have the picks to include with them, so I was like, fine, just like take hypothetical picks, just take whatever I got in the future. I don't have anything really to give you, but like let's just figure this out one way or another. And we managed to make it work out. So through the hypothetical picks, through adding Barrios, I decided to keep doing that. Obviously, not on this scale. There's not a lot of hypothetical first round picks that I'm trading. And to go back to the point we were making on the last trade, like it's really hard to just give out hypothetical picks without knowing what type of return you are exactly going to get. And I know that's going to come up later in one of these other trades. But yeah, this really set the stage for that. And kudos to EVO for being willing to accept that level of risk. And I think this trade could work out for both sides. So obviously, there's still a lot yet to come here with a lot of those picks being in 2025. And I forget what the future some of the other picks were. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one, trade 321. I traded or I acquired AJ Pollock for a 22 third with a condition. This was the first stat-based condition,
Oh,
interestingly enough. We'd had a lot of conditions before, but this was the first one. It was based on 1.5 WAR for AJ Pollock. This was the first ever trade with a condition that said, hey, if this player um, is does this or better in a certain stat, then there's an extra pick in there. And a lot of our conditional trades are like that now, but it took until this trade for that to happen.
that's interesting. Yeah. That was the beginning of those like April 2021, I think. So that was the beginning of the fourth season. Um, I think you see a lot of these uh kind of interesting variations in these trades pop up, starting around the third season. And it's funny because like we talk about the just trading draft picks initially as being such a big deal. Like when Kyle's first round pick got dealt for Kirilloff, Stewart, and Murphy, we were like, holy shit. And now it's like war condition picks. It's insane. But yeah, we've definitely seen a lot more of those. And I know a lot of those have even been discussed this offseason. So hey, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, no, we will. It's fun. I like trades like that where you're trying to root for a guy to do better. There was a trade a little bit before this that involved I acquired Dylan Betances, and if he was my team's save leader, then I would get a certain number of points. But that didn't. That was a little bit different than this. I didn't include it.
Yeah, we've also had what's it called? The Tatis deal had conditions based off whether one of them wins the MVP between now and 2025, and currently neither Story nor Tatis has won an MVP
Yeah, so far.
so far.
Um, but yeah, moving on. Trade 348. You sent Eugenio Suarez to Bo with the Flow for a conditional pick. This was the first time, and there was a hypothetical pick, future unowned pick going from you to Jake in this deal, but Jake was the first person to demand that it be sent to you before a certain date.
Yeah, good
Yeah,
for him.
which is
Um,
yeah, kind of the crux of his argument against reform for this type of trade.
yeah, just make sure you're baking that in. Uh, yeah, this was I believe that pick got fulfilled pretty quickly as I tend to do with these trades, but that one seemed to work out nicely for him as Suarez bounced back, and I believe he traded him to Eric in a deal for Mike Clevenger. So that part maybe didn't quite work out as much, although he did eventually trade Mike Clevenger in that deal to get Corey Seager. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Only three trades left to talk about. They all involve the two of us. We'll talk about them very quickly. Trade 421. You sent Dan Straley to me for a fourth round pick if in the case that we ever have a fourth round in the draft. The very first ever fourth rounder to be traded. I thought that was kind of nice.
That is a nice one. I don't know if we're going to expand to 4 rounds anytime soon. I kind of doubt it, actually, unless we expand the number of prospect spots, which I don't see us expanding from 20 anytime soon. But if we like hypothetically expanded to 25, I'd be in favor of adding a fourth round to the draft. But I don't think we're going to reach that point. I think the 50-man rosters are a very good number, and I think we're gonna. Well, we started with 40 when we started the league. We're now at 50. I don't think we're gonna get too much past 50. Not at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in a good spot for that right now. So hopefully that fourth rounder doesn't convey. Um, Up next, this was our Joey Votto trade with the condition. This was the first time a condition was altered in a trade. This is another one we haven't seen since. But yeah, this is kind of a weird one. It was a lot of fun. I liked it a lot. We skipped a couple in the middle, actually. I'm realizing now in the middle of our list. We can go back to them quickly at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was the first time we altered a condition. I acquired Joey Votto for the changing of a condition. I think that's kind of neat.
Joey Votto for the changing of a condition. Yeah, what was it? I think it was initially like a top 5 catcher, and then it changed in a top 10, something like that.
Yep, I think that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, I think that's what it was too. And then why don't we save this last one for last? Because this last one's a lot of fun. But and we could actually bring up. I'm surprised this one you didn't bring up, but let's come back to it afterwards. Why don't we jump back up to trade 226? I believe that's the first one we skipped.
Yeah, I believe it is the first one we skipped.
Or sorry, yeah, 226. Go ahead.
Yeah, I sent Ross Stripling, my 2024 second, and a player to be named later for Bell's Kitchen, to Bell's Kitchen rather, for Kyle Freeland and a player to be named later. This was the first of many player to be named later trades between me and Andrew. I just kind of wanted to talk about this deal for a couple reasons, a lot of reasons, really. This was first and foremost, me and Andrew have made a lot of weird deals since then, kind of trying to stretch the boundaries of what a trade can be, and kind of silly stuff like our hypothetical pick trade recently with the Pirates prospect and the guy with the same name as the other guy, and the next 2044 third rounder. But this was kind of where it started, the first time we traded players to be named later to each other. And the way that started, we were trying to get around the trade deadline, essentially. We were like, hey, I'll give you Stripling. I'm sick of Stripling. You're sick of Kyle Freeland. Let's trade him for each other. And let's throw some players to be named later in here in case we want to make another deal after the deadline. And we can just add them as players to be named later in the original deal. And then at some point in September of 2020, we decided to do that. Say, hey, these are two guys that will trade for each other. We can't technically make a trade, but we can just add them as players to be named later. And Eric said no. Eric said that you're not able to do that. You can only use players to be named later during the off season. But that's kind of what we were trying to do. The players to be named later eventually. I sent him CJ Crone, and he sent me Jake McGee as the player to be named later in another fun trade between me and Andrew, in which I traded him a second rounder for a third rounder, and also announced Jake McGee as the player to be named later coming my way. So essentially, the deal was really the second for the third and Jake McGee, but we announced it differently so that it'd be funny. And then also this kind of having these players to be named later open set the stage for our very famous Zuber Bukauskas deal. So yeah, just a lot to unpack here. A lot of fun things between me and Andrew that were sparked by this trade.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely. I got no words. Interesting that Crone was the player to be named later. That was actually one of the more significant player to be named later in league history in terms of performance.
Yeah, I'd say so. He was a good get for Andrew, certainly. I wish I could have had room for him. I remember him being very
Yeah,
good, but I just had no space on my team for him.
yeah, I do remember that. That's just how it goes sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
let's talk about this next one. This next one before we jump to the last one, but there's one more I want to add to the list that I cannot believe you forgot to add. Deep Sea Devers agreed to conditionally trade O'Neal Cruz, its 2021 third and its 2022 third to both the flow for Zach Davies and Taylor Rogers. Why did you include this trade?
Yeah, so this was the first trade that was voidable. At least in the terms of the trade. I'm sure actually the
The Felix,
Joe Ross trade we made was voided
yeah,
because Felix didn't pitch in the majors. But this was the one that specifically in the terms of the deal said this trade will be voided if X happens, if something with O'Neal Cruz's DUI issues. So I thought that was worth mentioning just because um, I feel like we've gotten more paranoid um,
we really
as
have.
as a whole, wanting to make sure we extract all the possible value and don't have any sort of opportunity cost left on the table here. And this is another. We don't want it to end up looking bad. And if it does end up looking bad, I want to just pull the ripcord and say this never happened.
Yep. I earlier when I said we're never going to see another three-team trade like the one we made early on in league history, it's because everybody's paranoid about what everybody else is doing in these trade talks, and they're worried that if you introduce another team into there, they're just going to go and take that player for themselves. Like, yeah, we are all very paranoid now. This
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
doesn't. This is why we have all these funky conditions now. Um, I don't think some people realize that either. Is it's just like, hey, it's like we do a lot of this crazy stuff, and it seems crazy, but there is a reason for our madness, uh, and it is a good reason.
Yeah, that's true. Every crazy thing that happens is just the logical extension of the previous crazy thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you just summed that up nicely.
All right. You said there was another one you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can't believe you forgot about this. This is trade 462. Uh, Big League Yell Champs has agreed to trade its 2100 third round pick to the Deep Seattle Devers for its 2100 third, which went to you. This is the first time a 2100 third round pick was dealt.
Yeah, I decided not to bother with this one.
But it's such a good story. We made the three-team deal. You ran up the price on Tyler Anderson. I got really pissed off about that. So I was like, you left the condition open. You're just like the next third I acquire. And I was like, what's the worst third that I could acquire? And I was like, maybe a 2100 third. So yeah, let's hope both of us are still alive when that pick happens. It would be hilarious. But yeah, there's since been several 2100 third round picks traded, but that was still one of my favorite moments, and I would be remiss if that did not get mentioned. But there is one more trade after this that you put on the rundown. Why don't you explain why it is on the rundown and announce the trade?
Yeah, so this was the deal, the Hunter Renfro deal, where you were sending me future the next second that you acquire. I made sure that you said between 2023 and 2025. That was something that Jake had done previously. But I also took veto power over that deal, which is the first time that ever happened. I think, and I'm starting to think that that may be something that I know I will try to do more often if you ever send me an unowned hypothetical pick. But I think a lot of other teams may start doing it too. I remember there being a lot of words involved as to what exactly the veto power entailed. And I think it's just a lot of fun. Just on that same topic of paranoia, that's where a lot of the not to call this a breakthrough, but a lot of the new things come from.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, there's been a push by certain people, especially me, to kind of come up with some creative trade conditions. And I know there's been a lot of paranoia with some of the other deals, especially the ones that I make. And I feel like this is one of the prime examples of people like you and Jake who have really pushed back against that and been like, hey, fine if you want to do this, but we have to establish some sort of check on it so that it doesn't, create the conditions for, things that just, turn into the wild, wild west. Which I think is very fair and I think is a better solution than outright banning it. And I think it is one of the things that makes the league as great as it does, is that we do have some of this crazy shit. But like, yeah, I do see, I do see the value in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So those were all the firsts we've had. We've kind of going through this, seen a lot of naturally big moments happened early on that we've kind of built on. And some of the newer ones are kind of trying to figure out ways to get around certain loopholes or try and avoid getting ripped off. But I'm curious to see, I guess, what the next big trade innovations will be.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the next crazy thing that I think of to, make a trade to make something work that I really want to work. Or hopefully it's not just me, hopefully it's someone else. I just feel like a lot of the recent developments have been me. Although you and Andrew with the player to be named laters were huge. The fourth round pick, I think, was your idea. That one was really big. The top three protection with that first round pick was not something I thought about. But even then, like we talked about, since trade 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 if you count 462, which I just added. And we talked about 17 or 16 of the top 100 trades. 16, 17, 17. So there's a lot of disparity there, but hopefully more is coming. I'm sure there will be. Do you want to put a trade number on that? Guess what the next trade that happens that we think would be worthy enough to crack this list?
Oh God, 548. I don't know.
551 was the first number that came in my head. I'm going to say 551.
All right. Well, there you have it.
Yep, there we have it. Another great episode of the Pitcher and a Hitter. Anything you'd like to add before we head off here?
No, that was everything. Thanks again for listening. This was we got a lot out of this one. It was kind of fun going back and kind of diving deeper into what makes our league unique.
Yeah, it's really special, just some of the crazy stuff that we have done and the connections that we have forged. And this is amazing. And it has honestly produced this episode, one of my favorite segments of all time, when we talked about the way that we phrase trades in announcing them. So that is wonderful. And I am so glad that Eric just copy and paste them and doesn't like standardize all of them, because that was such a fun tidbit. And I hope you all appreciate that as much as Cam and I did. But yeah, if we don't record before then, Merry Christmas, Cam. And I will see you in a couple short weeks here.
All right. Merry Christmas. See you then.
This podcast is good.